when you do theatre, you're able to understand the world from different perspectives, because that's what theatre does. Our generation, your parents and us, we've failed the planet. And I think we've failed society to a large extent because we've done things in a way that's not necessarily addressed the need of the moment. You folks can make that difference.
Sanjoy Roy, the visionary behind Teamwork Arts, the man who wears many hats, actor, director, producer, and a founder. His contribution to arts, crafts, and culture are literally unparalleled. He is a man of steel, from doing festivals in Dantewada to tiding through COVID to building the world's largest literature festival.
Every time I traveled, I used to go to all of these places, see amazing work, but really nothing mainstream from India. And I used to keep wondering, we have such amazing groups and performances and music and dance, but you only saw the Ravi Shankars and the Zakir Hussains, if at all. So in 1999-2000, we created our first platform at the Edinburgh Festivals. Shah Rukh started working with us, and Divya and Rituraj and Deepak Chopra sent us this email saying, would you consider inviting Oprah Winfrey to the festival? Would I consider? Obviously, I may think about it. Of course we consider. With Oprah came all of America and all of the international press. And that then fueled the world's interest in Jaipur. And after that, there was no looking back.
The contribution to Jaipur's economy and tourism, I don't think a single person in probably Indian history has had a more profound impact than you.
The government kept telling us you have to reduce the number of people coming through Diggi Palace.
Tell us about Kahani at Dantewada. You left your offers of Stanford and Berkeley. You also went to a war zone to conduct a festival. You must be really mad to do that.
Tina Brown, who coming back after many years, and she, in many ways, sort of branded it as the greatest festival on earth.
So what is it in this year's JLF that you're most looking forward to? Tell us how it all started.
Like many things in life, this too has been pretty much an accident. So, in school and university, I was pretty much part of theatre all the time. And in those early days, this was obviously not a profession, but for me it was. It was my love, it was my profession. So as we nearly completed studying in St. Stephen's, like all my peers, you applied abroad. And I got into Berkeley and Stanford and stuff. And my parents said, so, assume you'll be going. So I said, actually, no, because I was running Theatre Action Group, Barry's group at that point of time. Barry was the artistic director. I was the executive director. And I said, no, my passion is in theatre, so I'm not going anywhere. And that's where I met Punita. Punita and I met in TAG. And when we decided to get married, or rather when she decided that we were going to get married, my father-in-law said, sort of, young man, what do you do? So I said, I do theatre. So he said, Nini, what's your day job? So I said, no, I do theatre. I pay myself 1,000 rupees. So he wasn't impressed. And as the wedding got closer, he sort of said, so how are you going to support my daughter? So I said, your daughter is a manager in a big company and she's going to support us. I just want to make this very clear. So he wasn't happy. But it was also the time when television had just opened up. And if you remember, there were no television professionals. And Doordarshan had just started giving out time slots on their channel to private producers. So you had the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and so on and so forth. So Bobby Bedi, who was wonderful, continues to be a great producer. He had been coming to me a number of times saying that, Kar le yaar boss, why can't you come and direct and produce some of our series? I've got these slots. Initially, I used to say, no, I'm a theatre person. I'm not doing all of this television stuff. But as the wedding sort of drew closer, then I joined Bobby and worked with Bobby for a couple of years. And we did a whole slew of fun programs for television then. And then Mohit Satyanand, my partner, Mohit had also set up an advertising agency, having left Levers and Uncle Chips and Cracks. And we then set up teamwork, primarily as a way to give jobs to our colleagues in theatre so we could work during the day and we could rehearse in the evening. So that's how it actually started. And then they say the rest is history. In those days, we were pretty much, we Babu Basu, the Alva boys. We were pretty much the first off the starting stop in terms of in television. And while we went on to produce Tol Mulke Bol and Chuna Lagake and Newsline and stuff, um, there was no question, there's no concept of a season then. If you had a successful program, it ran every day, week after week, or every week, week after week, month after month, year after year. So by about 1995, we had, I think, 14 or 15 daily soap operas or game shows or food shows or other programs that we were producing. And those had been carrying on forever. And remember, we were shooting in Film City in Noida. There was no D&D, so you typically left your home at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and you finished 2 shifts of shooting there because we had so many programs. And then you came back at night, so you didn't have date night and you didn't have family occasions, etc. And every Saturday, I used to meet with all our producer and director colleagues, basically to see, what's the next week's program, which actor had misbehaved, so you had to write them out of the script. What's the next theme, etc. And 2 of our colleagues, Sharupa, who you know is one of our most senior producers then, and Manika, they both came and said, listen, we're brain dead. We can't do this. And I'm like, okay, if we don't want to do this, we'll go back to the arts, forgetting that notionally we were making money every hour on the hour. Of course, in those days, channels were paying you in a 120-day cycle, though the contract was 90 days. So they actually lived off the producers. So we were notionally making money, but still we were making some money. And when we told the channels that, we're going to start shutting our programs down, all hell broke loose because every channel said, we were making them a lot of money, Tol Mulke Bol, etc., but very, very popular programs. And they were very upset and they said, we won't pay you, and, all of the threats. But I was like, well, we've decided. So, and we nearly went bankrupt because, the arts is the arts. And we started losing people. People started leaving. And Mohit, Kanika and Val, meanwhile, had set up Friends of Music, which was a platform for not rock or Bollywood, nor popular music. But he said, anybody who's got something that's experimental. So people like Indian Ocean and Mrigya and Mohit Chauhan and Parikrama and Orange Street, all of them found that as their platform. And it was very successful. And we did the same thing in dance. We commissioned new stuff in dance, Aditi Mangaldas and Daksha Sheth and Asta Devu. And we told them, do stuff that otherwise you wouldn't have an opportunity to do. And nobody would allow you to do so. But go out and some of it will work and some of it won't. But that's okay. And we did the same for theatre. We commissioned new writing. And earlier, as you know, much of English theatre, at least in our time, was off West End and off Broadway. But this was new writing, and some of it was fantastic and won great audiences. Some of it was horrible, but won lots of awards. And meanwhile, because I'd started growing my hair, in 1995, 96, Punita had an accident in Goa. And we were between hospitals and stuff. And I hadn't cut my hair. So Aditya, our eldest son, one day came to me and said, are you planning to grow your hair? So I said, why? So he said, if you grow your hair, you can't come to my school. So I'm going, yes, no more parent-teacher meeting and annual day and everything that, you folks have been through. And I'm like, let's cut that shit out. So I grew my hair, and because my hair was always, salt and pepper, a lot of folks used to think, acha, ye artistic hair. And in those days, diversity was a big thing in the UK and abroad. So I used to get invited to teach courses or give lectures. So we created this substantial network across the world. And every time I traveled, I used to go to all of these places, see amazing work, but really nothing mainstream from India. And I used to keep wondering, we have such amazing groups and performances and music and dance, but you only saw the Ravi Shankars and the Zakir Hussains, if at all. And that's roughly where it stopped. And I used to come back and tell my colleagues, this is what we need to do. So in 1999, 2000, we created our first platform at the Edinburgh Festivals. And in the Edinburgh Festival is really the melting pot of creativity. And in those days, because visas wasn't such an issue either, you really had the world coming to Edinburgh. And it was the largest arts festival in the world. And Edinburgh is made up of 7 different festivals: the Edinburgh Tattoo, the Edinburgh International Festival, the Festival Fringe, the International Literature Program, and the Film Festival, the Science Festival. So the only thing we did differently is we programmed in each of these festivals and marketed under one umbrella. And that was hugely successful. And as they say, ek baar wo safed chhap lag jata hai na, the rest is history. And Singapore, meanwhile, had just finished investing about 1.3 billion into Singapore's arts economy infrastructure that built Esplanade, redone Victoria Theatre, etc. And they were looking for people who would help with content creation, both locally as well. And our colleague Shweta just moved to Singapore. And that was our first international office. And we helped Singapore and Esplanade set up their first festival. And as they say, in many ways, that became then our platform to move further out. We started working in Australia and New Zealand and then Hong Kong, and then came back through Europe, and then finally, set up the Jaipur Literature Festival, which in itself was an accident.
So I think you met John and Faith at the Edinburgh Festival?
Absolutely. So 2001, John and Faith had come out with a whole bunch of people. And when they saw how the arts could create value for built heritage, as you do in Edinburgh, because Edinburgh, everything is a historic building. It's a World UNESCO Heritage City. And they were like, this is what we need to do in Jaipur. And I was like, no, you guys do, we won't do, because, I wasn't sure that we could tackle the complications and the politics of a city like Jaipur, which lives in many centuries and many realities. So we helped them set up the festival, but never ran it. And when that festival, for various reasons went south, Faith and John, and within that program, Willie and Namita used to curate a sort of small literature segment. So they came and said, how can you let your baby die? Faith said, you have to come and rescue this. So then Willie, Namita, and we decided, let's take the literature program and set up what you now know as the Jaipur Literature Festival.
Is your first passion acting? Was it the production? Do you you've directed some award-winning movies as well, or do you enjoy being the founder, the boss of Teamwork Arts?
So my passion was always theatre, and except that when I was an actor at Theatre Action Group, or acted in Delhi, and this is in the late 70s, early 80s, there was nobody to run the theatre group. So, that too was a natural whatever. And I said, if this has to continue, then somebody has to run it in a way that it can run. So that sort of overcame this thing of me being an actor or me being a director. Today, both those are luxuries, which I can't necessarily afford because of the pressure on my time. But every now and then, every couple of years, I still direct, one of our big musicals which travel the world. Film, sadly, I've stopped directing because the amount of time that film takes. But perhaps one day, one will go back to doing something in that area too.
You must be having a lot of famous friends because Barry was probably the legend who's pretty much, I think, trained most of the famous actors from that generation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Shah Rukh started working with us, and Divya and Rituraj, who's just passed away, and Lilette and all of us were great friends. So yeah, our spectrum, Raghuveer Yadav, Meera Nair, our spectrum sort of crosses across both theatre and television and film. And in many ways, that was really the learning, because, when you do theatre, you're able to understand the world from different perspectives, because that's what theatre does. It also allows you to put on your acting face. So every time I'm doing bhashan, for example, it is my actor's face that's coming out there and making people believe how genuine one is. You put on that hat because it's so natural in a sense, and it works to your benefit.
So will we be seeing you act in one of the plays?
So many people, every now and then when they pop up, I'm like, I'm happy. There's this fear factor that I'll growl at everybody. So I think most directors run the other way when they think that they have to. But again, it's really a question of time. How do I take that kind of time, given the travel that I do? I mean, I travel less and less because Ankur, sure, everybody does most of the travel now. But even then, my colleagues are insistent that I attend as many of our festivals for their opening or closing. And that then becomes very time consuming. And how do you take that time out then to do this, the acting part of it? So maybe once I retire, I'll go back to that.
So I don't think you're going to retire anytime soon. It's not even a. So tell us about the JLF journey. You mentioned that Jaipur Virasat with John and Faith had started and it did not do well. And you were of course running the festival, but it wasn't doing financially, it wasn't feasible, and you sort of rescued it. So just tell us about how the empty halls went to the largest literature festival in the world. You're hosting it in 20 odd countries now?
In 10 odd countries.
10 odd countries, yeah.
So as I said, Jaipur Virasat, when that festival happened, we didn't run it. We only produced within it. And we actually had nothing to do with the running of their festival. It's when that festival, wasn't being successful, which is when we took over and set up. So 18 years ago, exactly 18 years ago. So it was December, I remember when Mahavir and Faith came across, and I think we were at a reception at the British High Commission, and they said, let's seal this deal of, taking over and making Jaipur Literature Festival. And that first year at Diggy, and we inherited Diggy. It's not that was our choice. We inherited Diggy because that's where Jaipur Virasat used to be. And one knew Jyotika and Ram Pratap because of the annual activity that we also used to be part of. And at that point of time, if you remember, Diggy was literally 3 rooms at $750 a pop and the Darbar Hall. And I remember it was a cold winter morning. And I came down and I told Sunil and somebody, I said, how many chairs are there in this Darbar Hall? And they said 230. I said, 100 ko nikalo. I said, take away 100. Who are these people coming? Because previously, if you hear Willie's stories, when they used to do it, there was 13, Japanese tourists who wandered in accidentally kind of stuff. But people came. And in that first year, we had 7,000 people who came. Wow. And in the second year, word of mouth, 14,000 came. And in the third year, 30,000 came. And the fourth year, which was the Oprah Winfrey year, 60,000 came. And then it continued to grow. And, I attribute it to a number of reasons. One is that here there was great programming, but it was also outside of the IIC and the IHCs of the world. It was in this sort of crumbling palace, which in itself in many ways denoted the romance and the valor of a particular era. It was also the great hospitality. Jyotika and all her sister-in-laws and Ram Pratap's sisters used to serve in their poshak. And then you had evening music. So it became like this incredible place for people to come together. And it was set in Jaipur against the backdrop of the Hawa Mahals and the Amer forts and the wonderful closing dinners that we used to do in your place. And I think all of that together, and the fact that also you had an opportunity to go out for retail therapy. It is the place to buy jewelry and furniture and block printed stuff. And all of this came together to contribute to the success of the festival. And when we came to the fourth year and Deepak Chopra sent us this email saying, would you consider inviting Oprah Winfrey to the festival? Would I consider? Obviously, I may think about it. Of course we consider. With Oprah came all of America and all of the international press. And that was the year Salman Rushdie was supposed to come, and that didn't happen. Yeah. And, as they say, there's no real bad press. And every year thereafter, for the next few years, there was some controversy. Somebody said something, somebody read something. And that then fueled the world's interest in Jaipur. And after that, there was no looking back, to the extent that we then had to dial back by about 2015, 2016. The government kept telling us, you have to reduce the number of people coming through Diggy Palace. And that's when we moved the music stage to your wonderful hotel at Clark's. And our effort then was, can we reduce numbers of people coming to us by about 100,000 a year? And we did that, if you remember, in 2018 by shutting down registration mid-December without telling anybody. Just stopping registration when it hit a 75,000 unique registration. And then, of course, COVID happened, so everything went to zero. But it then also allowed us to relook at the model when we were moving. It was a clean break. 2 years, there was nothing. We were online. which in itself was a huge new experience for us and huge audiences. We had 25 million people watching us online. And we moved to Clark's after conversations with you guys, making sure that was that clean break and an opportunity. And even today, people say, oh, Diggy Palace. But I think the sense of being able to work with you guys to create this ambience, which may not quite be that, but is that plus plus. So you have a much easier architecture, easier way to roam around the whole hotel, the areas that have now been opened up. This year, of course, we're opening up the new Surya Mahal, as we're going to call it, hall. So in many ways that worked both to contain our on-ground numbers and not make it as bheer bhadakka as it used to be, but also allow people to experience a whole new world there. And, one is seeing the way that your writers today prefer, for example, to stay at Clark's. 10 years ago, if you said that, they'd say, no, we'd like to stay in a Haveli, at Diggy or Unaro or Alsisar or one of the Havelis. But today it's like, no, we're, more and more happy. And that's the first place that people look to book, even if they're not in the festival. I think Clark's in that sense has found that space in the way that Diggy did 18 years ago. So it's been, in that evolution of the Jaipur Literature Festival, it's been amazing how, not necessarily because of us, I think it's also the audiences that have contributed so much. It's our partners like you folks who've stepped up to the table and said, the nitty-gritty, we need more bathrooms, stuff that makes it much easier for people to navigate space. That's what's really made the success of the festival.
More than just Clark's or Diggy or Teamwork Arts, I think it's put Jaipur on the world map. The contribution to Jaipur's economy and tourism, I don't think a single person in probably Indian history has had a more profound impact than you. And because you've sort of taken the JLF brand, you could have chosen to create any other brand in the world and taken it. You've taken the JLF brand to 10 different countries. And what kind of tourists come during this time? I'm talking about now. And what kind of economic impact have you measured that, and has it had?
So we last measured the economic impact about 10 or 12 years ago in the initial days. And at that point of time, it was 101 crores of additional income into Jaipur's economy. The measurement that I forget whether it was EY or whoever did it, was they measured hotels, travel into, transportation. And I think they took 5 disciplines. So they took furniture, jewelry, textile, printed textile, pottery, I think, and one other, I can't remember. It's difficult now to compute it because it's so large in that sense.
10x of that.
Everybody from the Mumfali wala to whatever benefits from it. But on the ground, pre-COVID and post-COVID, we've seen a change. So on the ground, for example, in terms of Indian audiences, say 50% used to be Jaipur, Rajasthan, then Delhi, Gurgaon, Bombay, Bangalore and stuff like that. And internationally, US and UK were number 1 and 2, and then Australia, Canada, all of the Commonwealth countries. Since we went online in 2020, that's changed pretty radically. So our online audiences, number 1 and 2 internationally is still US and UK. But number 3 and 4 at some point was Germany, China. And number 5 was Indonesia. Number 6 was Uzbekistan. Yesterday, Shivaji just showed me, the registrations for this year. It's 101 countries who have registered online and on ground.
Wow.
Everything from St. Kitts and Nevis and Tobago and whatever, the Dominion Republic, to the UAEs, the Saudi Arabias, and so on and so forth, with the USA, UK still dominating in terms of numbers. Locally, we've seen a shift. So yes, it's Jaipur, Rajasthan, etc., because so many people come and stay with friends, etc. But it's Delhi, Gurgaon, pretty much balanced with Bombay, but also Bangalore and Calcutta. But more importantly, what we're seeing is the smaller towns. So your Indores and Meerats and Aurangabads and Kozhikodes and Bhubaneswars, etc., pretty much on the map of where people are coming from today. So it's very interesting to see how that's changed. And the international audiences, as you've seen, now that COVID is well behind us, has, last 2 years certainly has been growing in sizable numbers. And I think in many ways, like you said, they're the ones who go out and take brand JLF or brand Jaipur or brand Rajasthan or brand India back and then talk about, how amazing it is. What we do is really ride on that. I mean, we added JLF Seattle and JLF North Carolina last year to our larger JLFs there. And it was so amazing that, when you roll up to a new city without a Rolodeck, you start growing it small, right? So we assume that maybe 150 people will come, 200 people will come. How much more? This was packed out, and as a result of which, again, this year you'll see so many people from Seattle will be coming to Jaipur as delegations because they got so excited about JLF coming to Seattle.
JLF and Maldives also.
And JLF Maldives. So they're coming here. Similarly, JLF in Spain, in Valladolid. Remember, this is not Madrid or Barcelona. This is Valladolid. It's an hour away. And in our first year, we were in the city square. By the second year, we had outgrown the town square, and we are now in the Campo Grande, which is their central park, because of the overwhelming response of Spanish people. And it's our first non-English speaking JLF, where everything is simultaneous translation. So you have Spanish and English together. But there are just thousands of people who come. And again, you'll see a huge Spanish delegation this year coming, their ministers and so on and so forth. And that in many ways has allowed us to spin what we do with JLF in different parts of the world. Remember, it started in many ways for us. It started as a get out of jail free card, because when JLF continued to be at the eye of the proverbial storm, we were like, what do we do to safeguard the brand? Which is why 11 years or 12 years ago, we set up JLF in London. And because of our earlier association in the UK, which is very, very deep, I used to sit on the Arts Council of England's board as well, diversity board. We were able to get all of these mainstream venues on board. So JLF set up in the South Bank. And then we moved to the British Library after 3 years after Jude Kelly left. And now we're opening up a new Voices of Faith at the Barbican in March of this year, a new festival that we're proposing. So in many ways, that's been the trajectory and the interest, I think, in many things Indian. I won't say all things Indian, but many things Indian. Yoga still, and this is something you all have been experimenting with. And we're seeing our sacred series, whether it's Awake in Florida, where you have the 80-somethings sort of coming and doing yoga stretches at 7:30 in the morning with crystal meditation. But in the dickies of the car, they will have grenade launchers and, automatic rifles and stuff like that. So it's the contrast that you're seeing. And I think India needs to do, certainly the tourism and hospitality segment, needs to do much more to be able to drive that.
Amazing. So you truly made literature, crafts, and art sexy. A lot of the people you see buying books at JLF probably don't know how to speak English. A lot of the people you see wanting these passes from the government, like hundreds of passes every year. Most of them don't even know which authors are coming, etc. Right? Do you think that would be one of your biggest contributions as Teamwork Arts, as a legacy? Or do you think the fact that you've helped people rediscover Amritsar, you have a beautiful festival there, you have Kabira, which is one of the most beautiful festivals at Varanasi, now you're doing something at Calcutta. What would you like Teamwork Arts' lasting legacy to be? Not,
in many ways, I'll give you a story. So I think in the fourth year, the Oprah Winfrey years, the first year we put into place security. And I remember, I welcome everybody for an hour every day. So at Diggy, we used to open the gates at 7:30. So I was there at the Gol Chakkar welcoming people. And this boy and a man came through the Diggy Haveli gate. And they didn't look like they belonged, so the guards sort of stopped them. And because I was there, I went up and said, Bhaiya, kya baat hai? Can I help you? And he said, I sleep on the pavement opposite SMS hospital. And I know that I'll never be able to afford to send my son to school or be able to buy him a book. But I thought that if he heard a story, it would change his life forever. And I hear that you tell stories. So I brought him. And I'm really sorry. And he turned to go. And for me, that was for the first time the success of perhaps what we'd done, because, literature's always seemed to be very elitist. Our effort in the first few years was to break that and to make it a city acceptable festival for everybody, which is the reason why it was free. And for this man to come through the Haveli gates in a place like Jaipur, where obviously he didn't think twice about coming through the gate, and he did, was a huge success to us. Similarly, I think the next 3 years later, this very tall gentleman, very well dressed, and he comes to even Clark's now, came up to me and he said, I come from a village 40 kilometers from Gorakhpur, and I've always enjoyed everything that you do. So I come by train. I stay at the railway station at the waiting room, and I come every day to the festival. And I buy books from the bookshop and I take them back. And in the evenings, I read to the adult population in the village. In the morning, I read to the kids. And the next time when he came a few years later, he came with 10 or 11 other villagers from 6 different villages, where they now share the books that they buy from here and take back. So in terms of legacy, it's, why is it that we set out to do what we do? We do it because we feel that in this world where there's so much of ignorance, the phone or WhatsApp has allowed us to think that we know about everything. But primarily there's ignorance, and ignorance leads to hatred. You don't know something about a religion or a caste or a tradition or whatever. It's easy to hate. Hate for us, for human beings, is a default setting. Liking somebody is much harder, loving somebody very hard. So our thing is, can we, through considered knowledge and information, be it through the JLFs or through Kabira or through Sacred Amritsar or whatever we do, can we push back on some of this ignorance? Can we give people a sense of what this tradition and culture is? What is the syncretic culture that we're talking about? What is this built heritage that we only know how to take a pee against, this wall? And by doing that, can we push back on that sense of hatred? And by pushing back on hatred, can we make a difference to the kind of violence that we're seeing that consumes us all? That, if we're able to do, is really the legacy. As you know, in Jaipur and Delhi today, as a lead up to the festival, Anand, we reach out to about 110 schools. So these are schools who can't come to us. So we go to them. Or even things like what your mom has been doing with the animals, to do a session around that, or disability, as we do every year. Why do we need to do that? Is that sexy? Most people would say no, but we think that this is vital for all of us to understand. And by understanding, if you engage with it and say, okay, next time I see a street dog or an animal in distress, I will try and help. Or I see a child on the street in a cold day or on a rainy day without anything, I'll try and help. Or somebody from a minority community or a religion being, beaten up on, I'll try and stop that. That's how we can make a difference. And most importantly, can we make a contribution towards the environment? I mean, as you know, in Varanasi, of course, today we have waste zero, we're energy neutral, and we've offset our carbon footprint. And we're trying to do that in Jaipur, as you know, and trying to audit it. And last year we were able to offset our energy use, etc. Again, our effort is, can each of us make that effort? Yes, it's a little more expensive. Yes, you need to do more work. But is it impossible? No, it's not. And we hope that folks like you who do 500 banquets a month, etc., your colleagues also get into the habit of just doing that additional something to be able to see how we can rescue landfills, rescue animals, repurpose stuff, as you've done with those wonderful animals in and around your property. and give other people a space too. The birds in your property, for example, or the peacocks at Diggy. We forget why it's so important to engage with nature. And I think by doing festivals like this in this kind of outdoor environment, not necessarily as a banquet or a conference, that's what makes the difference. It allows you to engage with all of these different kinds of elements. That could be the legacy, if at all.
Not only that, what you did at Dantewada, that was truly inspirational. You left your offers of Stanford and Berkeley. You also went to a war zone to conduct a festival. You must be really mad to do that.
As you know, I look after, or I helped set up Salam Malik Trust, which is a trust for street children. And one has always been very clear, if we have to make a difference, our generation, your parents and us, we've failed the planet. And I think we've failed society to a large extent because we've done things in a way that's not necessarily addressed the need of the moment. You folks can make that difference. Your kids can make that difference. If we don't bring all of these people on board, how will we make a change? I think the really exciting thing about the Jaipur Literature Festival is today there's so many young people who've been motivated to write. Our youngest writer was at the age of 8 because his or her parents, started bringing them for a very young age. Zuni Anupam Chopra and Vidhu Vinod Chopra's daughter was the first person to appear on our stage at the age of 13 because she'd been coming with her parents every year to the festival and decided that she was inspired to write a book. Our oldest writer was 92, Satyajit Krishnan's mother, Prem Krishnan. She wrote a wonderful dirge about her own distress and her family story. And this inspiration is what is vital. So wherever we do a festival, be it in Boulder, Colorado or South Chicago, our effort is, can we go to those communities or those young communities that don't have access?
Tell us about Kahani at Dantewada.
So Kahani, again, started out of this. Kahani is the magic of storytelling. And as we know, everything that I'm doing today is also storytelling. Everything that you do is storytelling. That's what we do, right? And our effort was every kid has a story. So how do we tap into that story? And we got this request saying that, from Dantewada saying in this Maoist, very problematic space, the kids there had never had access to school because teachers couldn't make it to the village. And in, as you said, a fit of madness, I was like, yeah, okay, why not? Let's go for it. So we were able to broker a truce between the Maoists and the government for that weekend. And we said, let your kids come. We'll send the buses out. The administration will send the buses out. We'll bring them in and give them a sense of what these stories are. And I can't tell you, for the first time, these kids, many of them had come out of their villages onto the main road, got onto a bus and arrived in what their idea of a town or city was, which was Dantewada. Where we made the mistake is, we had taken people to tell stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and all of this kind of stuff. They had no idea about these traditional stories that we think are universal. But they had their own stories about, the hills and the mountains and the seas and the universe and the rivers and the people. And the other great leveler was Bollywood. I mean, you put Bollywood music, everybody loves it. So we were able to use that in a workshop system to be able to get the best out of that. And today, Kahani travels, whether it's in Varanasi, whether it's in Pune, whether it's in and around Delhi, Gurgaon or Chandigarh. And we also have the Ishara International Puppet Festival. These are our kids-specific festivals because we believe catch them young. Pretty much like Times of India used to do with their newspaper program, is if they get a sense of this as part of the arts, then maybe it'll make a difference growing up.
Amazing. Another thing which I've realized about teamwork arts is that the team has not left you despite the toughest times. And all of them are extremely competent, and probably other firms in the same space would pay them 2-3 times the amount of money. But there is something magnetic about you. There's something which just keeps them glued to you. Even if they've gone and sort of started their consultancies, etc., they just keep coming back. You've gone through COVID. You've gone through years and years of losses. You got Ambit in now. I think there is someone. How do you manage that? Because with all this that you're doing, to retain the talent, I think is the most important, because you're a completely people-centric business.
Oh, totally. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily my daan or my expertise. It's just that, the way we are as an organization is that one is I believe that everybody should get on and do what they do. So you empower everybody. And our thing has always been, can you learn from your mistakes? And if you've made a mistake, accept it, learn from it, and move on. So we don't have a culture of, "Oh, you've done this and, tomorrow I'm going to whatever." We try and keep it as non-toxic as possible. Today we're about 100 odd people and we continue to grow. And as you said, COVID, we were very clear that, in COVID, because everybody kept saying, how are you going to manage? And because it's going to be a long-term thing. And I said, well, this is not the time that we can let go of anybody, because where will they go to? Everybody has their families and stuff. So we all willingly took salary cuts, from the lowest who took 5% to folks like us who took 80% of salary cuts, and then worked to make sure that, some of this, could be sustainable. But it was also great learnings, and in that learning, we learned together. And remember, for us, every day is a new day. India by the Creek in Dubai is different from India by the Bay in Hong Kong, which is different from India by the Bosphorus in Turkey, which is different from JLF in London or Sacred. But in all, there's a learning and there's an opportunity for you to grow, or for you to be able to realize your own potential. And many of us in the organization are also musicians or theater people or whatever. And I always say, go and do that as well. Do what you have to do, as long as you're able to manage your time and stuff like that. And I think that's what makes it so inspirational. And the fact that, today, do I have a role in a festival? No, I don't. Jaipur, yes. But barring that, I don't really have a role. I go and do bhashan at the opening and closing and dress up and toss my hair around. But that's my role. I actually don't have anything specific to do, because all our colleagues who they're all, generals in their own right, and they do a fabulous job. And they then mentor the new folks who are coming through the door. But the other opportunity that we have is, because we have Jaipur and so many of our festivals, and we have this vast training program that Punita does for us every year, where we put through 400, 450 people. Over a period of time, these people inculcate our philosophy. We're also able to see who works for this stressful situation in a front-facing, because everything here is front-facing, as you know, which is not easy, right? And then over a period of time, we induct them into the organization. So there's this runway. So it's not that everybody's coming in laterally or coming in fresh off the boat. It's a process. And that process allows the philosophy to permeate through. And sometimes, most of the times it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, then we encourage those people. We say, hey, look for something else. Maybe this is not your calling. Find something else. But that's really few and far in between. So we've all grown in many ways like that. And many folks from Teamwork today have been so successful, whether they're in Amazon or Netflix or NMAC in Bombay, or in different companies, or they've set up their own companies, as you said. But we continue to be working with them in some way or the other.
So Mohit and you have a very close relationship, and you are mentioning that he doesn't like your indulgence in the festival in Colorado. And so do you think the foreign festivals are an indulgence which Teamwork Arts can do without, or do you think they are equally important?
I think they carry our brand forward. If we didn't have, so in many ways, I look at it as a marketing tool. And sure, you may lose a little bit of money on them, say on Boulder, Colorado, whatever. But what it does, would you be able to get that same kind of publicity and marketing by spending an equivalent dollar through television, radio, and print media? No.
Absolutely.
So this is in many ways, and why has the Jaipur Literature Festival been so successful? Because we are alive through the year. At any given point of time, there's some episode running online from a different country. So we're an 12-month-a-year fresh festival. So that continues to echo, because today you have 300 festivals to choose from. So why should people from Bangalore, which has got 3 festivals, or people from Calcutta, which has got 3 festivals, or Bombay, which has got 2 festivals, come out to the Jaipur Literature Festival? Because of this sense of being able to brand it in a particular way. So I don't see it to be an indulgence. I see it to be a necessity. And some of them, yes, don't make money, but some of them do. I mean, Hong Kong, for example, is very successful. Singapore is very successful. Florida was very successful. Seattle, etc., will become successful at some point of time, and we can see that. Similarly with Egypt or
Amazing.
Or Turkey or South Africa or whatever.
It's extremely tough to make an event successful, and so many of them being profitable outside of India is, and especially in this field, is because it's not a music festival or it's not some sort of a, which are easier to sell, an alcohol festival. This is more about literature, crafts and art. You're also doing now the Jaigarh Festival, which I think Avik also had a huge role to play in, and which was hugely successful. And you had the first edition. Can you tell us more about that and what your plans for that?
So everything that we do has to have a strategy or be part of our strategy. So our strategy in this whole built heritage space, which is much of the work that we do across the world. So this really was the coming together of that. And when City Palace sort of approached us and said, can we think of something? Our immediate thing was, so which part of Jaipur needs that additional something? Jaigarh was the obvious, waiting to happen. Very difficult. The logistics in Jaigarh, as you know, was very difficult. The first evening got rained out because of the climate situation. But Avik and our colleagues did an amazing job by just bringing it to life and bringing every area in Jaigarh to life. We see this to be growing into a festival as large as the Jaipur Literature Festival, because it's a general interest festival. It's got music and theatre and dance and literature and design and craft and food and everything together, and much more of a people's festival, or as we've seen, the kinds of audiences that came through. So to have 11,000 people come through our doors, or 11,000 tickets or 12,000 tickets or whatever we sold in this first day over 2 days was really, we didn't think that would be, especially given the weather and how chilly it was and the location. But people came. It was a revelation for most of the people. And people loved what they saw. They may have frozen to death at the end of the evening, but they still loved the experience. And this is something that will continue to grow. And much of the work that we're doing in different parts of India now, or even across the world, in this heritage space is this. How do you bring a heritage or built heritage space alive using the arts, and then telling the story about that space, which gives you your identity, gives you your history, gives you your origins. I mean, Jaigarh is an 11th century a fort which was built, for various reasons. And even till, the early 20th century, the crown prince of the Jaipur state couldn't go to Jaigarh without the Maharaja's permission, because it was the space for armory and innovation and the whole innovation that was created from the armory. So we feel this to be a really exciting program and a place where we can mix contemporary with tradition and bring it alive.
So what is it in this year's JLF that you're most looking forward to?
It's an amazing program this year, whether it's an Anthony Sattin or the 4 Nobel laureates. There's a whole crime series theme, as you know, this year. Geopolitics is huge. We've got, I think, 6 sessions on Gaza and Palestine and the wars. There's a whole theme on the fractured world, which looks at Ukraine, Russia, Gaza, Israel, parts of Africa and Middle East, etc. Geopolitics, we're seeing Trump is going to come to power. We've seen the changes in the UK, continuation in India, what's happening in Russia and China. So much of it really to make sense of the way that we are in the world. There's so many biographies. There's a very strong theatre program. There's Amol Palekar's with his biography, M.K. Raina, Ela Arun, Manav Kaul. There's Sir David Hare. So there's a huge program as far as that's concerned. There are people like Tina Brown who are coming back after many years, and she, in many ways, sort of branded it as the greatest festival on earth, many years ago when she was last here. So it's really, in that sense, a coming back together. And, with the new spaces, we're opening up at the back where Mughal tent used to be, it'll now become the food court. So grow that space so that it becomes much more personable and a much nicer experience for people. Many years ago, I remember pre-COVID, we'd done a survey. We do surveys every year. And that time, the survey came through that, yes, it may be a literature festival, but it's also seen as a food festival. And therefore,
Absolutely.
This year, for example, all the chefs that we're getting, we're going to be working with your chefs to create special meals in the afternoon. So food is a big theme. I think we have over 12 different, Michelin-starred chefs coming in, Anand George and everybody else coming in from across the world. So I think that's going to be really exciting. And I have to remind Anand George to bring me some salmon Kerala pickle.
Like for the youngsters out here, one book which you feel that sort of changed your life?
I read a lot. I don't
Yes,
watch
that's what I
television. I very rarely see film. Not because I don't want to. It's just that film images don't allow me to sleep. So therefore, I prefer reading books. So I read 6 books at a time, much of it to do with my homework as much as it is to do with pleasure. But some, there are many books so I can't do one book, but Tarun Tejpal's more recent book, Line of Mercy, which looked at the backstories of people in prison. Simon C. Bag Montefiore's book on Jerusalem, which sets the context of what's happening today. And I keep saying every world leader needs to read that book. Brian Catlos's book on Spain and how this very Islamic Spain turned to a very Christian Spain, because we don't look at Spain as an Islamic place, but it was for much of its history. Its Christendom is a much more recent offering. Josephine Quinn's How the World Made the West, a seminal reading of understanding how ideas travel. We're talking about H-1B1 visas, we're talking about immigration laws. Countries are talking about how they should stop it. But what we're seeing in the books is that the West wouldn't be the West if these ideas hadn't traveled from the East, from places like India and the Far East, China, etc., through the Middle East and the Arab world to the Levant, which is the Mediterranean, which is what's made civilization in the Western sense what it is today. And to now say that, oh, this is a bad thing, is ridiculous. So, you need to read books like that, or the history of world literature. So, yeah, I keep saying, whatever it is, good, bad, ugly, read. Because every time you read a book, you'll get something. However bad a book it is, you'll really get something different. You'll get a different perspective. You'll get a different worldview. And that's what makes us, right? Otherwise, we go with, oh, this is my thinking. I am, left, or I am right, or I'm center, or I love this one, or I love that one. And I'm saying, no, open your eyes to all perspective.
I think that's very beautiful about the Jaipur Literature Festival as well. So you get people from sort of left, right, center. It's not your thinking or one person in Teamwork Arts thinking. It's about letting all ideas flow, which is great. Other than, I wanted to understand that, has there been a mentor in your life? Or do you think that someone at a young age left a great impression, or you learned something?
Yeah, certainly Satyajit mom, Prem Krishnan, who was she used to run up the theatre in school. Vijay Tankha and Dr. Gupta and Dr. Vora from St. Stephen's, my philosophy department. My parents, the kids, Avik and Aditya, Punita. You get, from everybody, you get something that's different. From your friends, from my colleagues. Because you're always learning, right? If you're open to learning, you're always learning. And in our world, you meet so many interesting people. Every day I'm meeting people somewhere in the world, which belies, where we come from. These are great scholars and historians. And every time you have a conversation, every time I go to Harvard or MIT or Cambridge or Oxford or LSE or whatever, either to do a bhashan or to do whatever, you're still learning because you meet all of these incredible minds, the Priyambada Natarajans, the Marcus du Sautoys, the Homi Bhabas, the uh, Howard Sandals of the world. Everybody, and in many ways, look at the world that we live in, right? We have access to these people and you're able to listen to them without traveling very far, mostly free of cost in some sense of the word. I mean, that's like a joy. So, so I'd say that everything is,
But any person who you would like to have dinner with, who's because you've sort of done it with multiple presidents, etc. But someone who you feel that dead or alive, who you'd like to.
Nehru and Gandhi. I mean, they would be two definitely. Nelson Mandela, who I did meet while he was alive.
Wow.
Justice Albie Sachs, who took from the Indian Constitution and created the South African Constitution. The Kennedys, more for what they stand for. JFK, the founding fathers of that world, people like Maulana Azad, etc. Because in many ways, look at the Indian Constitution. It has to be the most seminal piece of writing in this last 100 years anywhere in the world. And the number of people who borrowed from the Indian Constitution. So our founding fathers were quite incredible in their vision of. Remember, Nehru insisted that every person in India got a vote, even while the Constituent Assembly was saying, no, women shouldn't, and people who don't read shouldn't, and, people. But he was like, no, everybody should. I mean, the vote came to women much later, say, or the Africans much later. In America, vote came much later to women, much later, or even the Aboriginal community in Australia after 1987.
Yes.
And here we were, in 1947, they had this vision of what the world could be. And we spend our time dissing them without really appreciating what they've gave to us or what they've left, the legacy that they've left to us. So I think it's amazing. And of course, you always want to meet the great historical figures who've changed world history.
So 10 years from today, where do we see Sanjoy Roy?
I don't know. I'm not necessarily a great crystal gazer. I know that I'll never stop working. I may not continue being in the role that I am in teamwork, and I hope that I'm not, and my colleagues can take over, and I can come and shake my hair wherever they need. But it's also much of my work today is really looking at policy. How can we look at unlocking the potential of the creative and the cultural segment, which includes entertainment, hospitality, tourism, all of this, textiles, and so on and so forth. My understanding, or because I co-chair the FICCI committee on this, is that there's about 400 million people just in India that are part of this sector. But what is it that we're doing for them? How do you unlock it? Can we make just that like a 3 trillion economy for the country? It's pegged at about 3.7 trillion right now, the world over.
Right.
But if you look at the fact that more and more the Coldplays of the world, etc., are coming and finding that kind of traction. Look at the ecosystem around, the textile tradition, everything that we wear, all the design around us. How do we unlock that potential? How do we market it? How do we create brands? Why don't we have brands like that, like the Louis Vuittons of the world, etc.? We should, because the work that you do in India finally gets translated into the Louis Vuittons or the YSLs, etc. So why isn't it from here? So what do we need to do to unlock that? So much of my work today is really looking at policy and nudging not just government here in India or state governments, but all of the places, long hair, so I sit on many of government boards in different parts of the world, nudging them to relook at the way that they're looking at this. And then how do you create that experience? How do you bring hospitality and tourism into that mix to be able to unlock all of this potentially together?
Amazing. So you've got Sanjay Aggarwal, another famous brand from Jaipur, the founder of AU Bank, as one of the investors now. So how's the relationship with him, and how's that changed things for teamwork?
We've been so lucky, and even when 11, 12 years ago, I get a call one day, sitting in the office, and somebody called somebody to call me. because I wasn't taking that somebody's call. So this was then Admiral Paintel's son-in-law, Atul Kanwar, again from a Jaipur family. And he was like, you don't take our calls. I said, I don't have your number. So he said, can we come and meet you? So I said, yeah, sure, come and meet me. So he and Sid Kedia came out from Ambit Pragma. And at the end of that 1 hour, I was flying out to Australia. They said, actually, the reason why we've come to meet you is we really wanted to invest in you. So I laughed and I said, we're an arts company. How will you exit? I don't think you know what you're talking about. Why don't you go and do your homework? And we used to represent Cirque du Soleil and Disney International, etc. So I said,
Interesting.
I said, go and meet these people. Yeah. See how they've transformed and then come back. So after 3 or 4 weeks, they came back and said, can we do a presentation? I said, sure. And they did this presentation of where they saw us. And I turned around and looked around the room and asked Ankur and Sharupa and everybody what they thought. And everybody said, fabulous presentation, but this is not for us. And they said, oh, okay. They said, what should we do now? I said, thank you so much for your time. They said, no, can we put down everything in your head on a piece of paper as a business plan? So I said, sure. For me, it was a learning, or for us, it was a learning. So Sid stayed with us for 3 months and translated all that we had to do in a business plan. And then at the end of the 3 months, he said, so now here's the business plan. And I said, thank you. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And blah, blah, blah. And at that point, their fund, which is the Ambit Rajiv Aggarwal Ashok Vadra's fund, had been invested into by IFC, CDC, IFC from the USA, CDC from the UK, and MEDA from Canada, big insurance funds. And so they said, the chairman of IFC is coming. He really wants to meet you. So I flew down to Bombay, and this was the last year of Manmohan Singh's government. And there was no investment coming into India anymore. And at the end of this meeting, I said, I just want to place on record my deepest appreciation for everything that you've done for us. It's really, because we've never been on the other side. And we really learned. And so he said, Sanjoy, we keep laughing that every day we get all of these many presentations to invest. And we say, no, here is a company that we want to invest in a sector that's never been invested in, ever, in history. And you keep saying no to us. He said, you have a commitment phobia. So anyway, I went away, and one day I woke up middle of the night in October, November, and I told Punita, what am I so worried about? Why don't we just go for it? Here's knocking. And Anand, everybody has this horrible horror stories about investments and how they go south very quickly in terms of relationships. Whether it was our relationship with Ambit Pragma and with Rajiv, sadly he died just as COVID happened, when we were going to do our next raise and when they had to move out, or with Ashok ever since then, or now with Sanjay Aggarwal and our many investors, Naushad Forbes and Denzel D'Souza and all the other investors who we have on board. It's really been an interesting journey, because our thing always, even to Ambit, I think in the early days when we had consultants sitting here to create systems and processes and, everything that you folks know. And one day I sort of sat back after 6 months and I said, so what have you done to make life easier for everybody here? What have you done to create value? And I went back to the board and I said, why did you buy us? You bought us for our philosophy, right? How will you sell us for our philosophy, right? That'll give you the ZX or XX or whatever. I said, if you're going to make us into a Danone or a yogurt process plant, you're not going to do that. If there's something that makes our lives easier, happy to do it. If not, well, no, So we were able to find this equation with each other, and even with Sanjay, who's amazing, because, it's not that Sanjay was the first person who would come to buy or get a stake in Teamwork. Many people had come pre-COVID and during COVID, but we just felt it wasn't for the right reasons. And every time Ashok used to call me or Rajiv used to call me to say, there's a 350 crore valuation offer on the table. They're waiting to sign the check. But they were good enough to give me that space to say no, and they accepted that. It may not have been the best decision, looking back, etc., to say no to that kind of money. But I was clear that if whoever was investing into us wasn't of the same philosophy, then the money wouldn't make
Makes
sense.
yeah.
And or we sell everything and leave, and then it's for them to do stuff. Because this is not necessarily our business, including hospitality to a large extent, isn't only about the dollars and the dimes. It's about creating a space. And that space you have to protect, as you know. And it's not an easy space. We've got into so much of trouble, and we continue to get into trouble, not just here in America, Israel, across the world. We're always in trouble. But we got that space fairly fiercely. And every time somebody comes and says, why are you being so whatever? I said, listen, we need to do what we need to do. They need to do what they need to do. And I think let's be very clear about that. So as long as, I have some say in this, I'll continue to be impassioned. It may not be the best investment strategy or the best strategy to growth, but we haven't done too bad either. We've created value. They aren't other examples of these kinds of companies. And I'm hoping, and my hope, when I set out to create Teamwork with Mohit as a company, was to show that the arts can create wealth in the way that arts does or banks do, tangible wealth, not just intangible. Intangible, everybody creates, but to create tangible wealth so that other folks can look at us and say, they were successful, we should do it as well as professions. And I think 35 years into the business, there are more and more educational institutions now looking at this as a profession, teaching it as a profession, not just in India, but across the world. And that's the hope, that this becomes a profession and is valued as much as, say, banking or retail or anything else.
I think you've created more value than most businesses would dream tangibly. If you were to do that for Jaipur or the many cities, whether it's Amritsar, Varanasi, a lot of ways you are helping create tourism in India. Thank you so much for giving me this time. Thank you for doing whatever you are for the city of Jaipur, which is my hometown.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being such wonderful hosts and partners for now, 10 years? It's been 11
Probably
years?
more.
Yeah. Because JLF Music Stage moved to Clark's when? In 2011?
Maybe.
Or 12? I can't remember how long ago. But yeah, I think it's
But
been
I think
amazing.
Mom and you go back 3 decades.
Yeah. I'm 32, so I don't know. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanjoy.
Thank you.